House Bill number 358 by Representative James. It's an act amending Title 40 and Act 96, 2016, regular session relative to marijuana for therapeutic use.
Senator Mills.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill does two or three things, and I'll explain it. The first portion of the bill basically eliminates an exception of the delivery of medical marijuana. We approved the delivery of medical marijuana orally. This takes in the same exact dosage form, the exact therapeutic dosage form, and it allows for the inhalation of a metered device. This is done a lot of times in pharmacy when you may have a drug that's used for asthma. You may be able to take it by tablet form, by liquid form, and by inhalation metered form. This does not change any of the requirements of what the dosage should be. It just is a different delivery mechanism. That's the first thing the bill does. The second thing it allows is if you're not domiciled in Louisiana as a physician, but you're licensed in Louisiana under good standings, it allows you, if you have a specific patient relationship, it allows you to be able to prescribe or recommend medical marijuana if you're licensed in Louisiana in good standing. And the very last portion of the bill, and on page 3, basically with technology as it's evolving, it basically takes the ethanol extraction process to develop the product because there's more effective means to do that. So it eliminates that and it allows science to kind of evolve into it. And that's basically what it does. The very last section of the bill eliminates some law, but what it eliminates basically is a duplication of law. When we first passed the legislation, we had a section if it was a Schedule I drug or it was a Schedule II drug. Now it basically has the same identical parts of law, but it's not duplicated. And that's everything it does. And I have a question, Mr. President.
All right. Do you have an amendment, Mr. Secretary? Maybe this will take care of some of the questions.
Yes, sir, I have amendments by Senator Mills. They're set number 2661. 2661.
Senator Mills on the amendment.
Yes, this amendment is in working with the Board of Medical Examiners. Last year we approved as a body, we approved that if autism was going to be a diagnosis for a clinical condition, if you have a debilitating condition, and you had certain specifications to be able to recommend autism, then it could basically be allowed for pediatric use. The Board of Medical Examiners said there's some major problems with that, and there needed to be a clarification of who could do it. And if you look under the underlying language, it basically says, for the purpose of subsection, a pediatric subspecialist is an individual licensed to practice medicine in any state in the United States who provides care to patients with autism spectrum disorder. This gives the Board of Medical Examiners some clarity on that. So it's not expanding it just says which physicians can recommend for autism. And that's what it does.
Question from Senator Walsworth.
Hey, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, on especially at the very end. So if you're a subspecialist and you're licensed to practice medicine in Colorado, but not in Louisiana. Go ahead.
That's a very good question. You could be domiciled in Colorado, but if this bill passes, you have to be licensed with the Louisiana Board of Medical Examiners. And that's happening a lot right now. Thank you. Good question.
Any objection to adoption of the amendment? All right, stands adopted. Our questions on the bill, Senator Morrell.
I just want you to take one more time to explain, because I know when you earlier said inhalation, some people are not as technically proficient as you are, and by inhalation you mean by delivery of an inhaler, sort of like an asthmatic inhaler, correct?
Thank you for the clarification. Yes, this is not vaping. Vaping is a big deal, and you'll see some issues with smoking and vaping. This is an asthma pump. This is not anything to do with vaping. This is the same drug in the delivery sense, and think if you have anybody in your family with asthma. There's the tablet, there's the liquid, and then there's the inhaler that you use. It's being proven that the inhalation piece works a lot quicker than if you take it orally. It's just the delivery form.
All right, so you have another amendment, Mr. Secretary, now?
I have amendments sent up by Senator Clater. There's set number 2783. 2783.
Senator Clay on the amendment.
So, thank you, Mr. President. This amendment is talking about what JP just came down and had a question about, where I can appreciate that the inhalation side, I know what a inhaler looks like. I've seen kids that have asthma fool with that, but when we passed this original bill, I voted for it originally because it didn't include inhalation, and so my level of comfort, even though I know that it provides some relief to some folks, and I've got the same note that you got from the guy that's got post-traumatic stress syndrome. I'd like to be able to help him, but I'm just not comfortable with the way that inhalation is defined, so it's difficult for me to vote for the bill in that posture. So that's what the amendment does. It strikes the inhalation language. I see questions.
Senator Peacock, you got a question?
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Claytor, I'm glad you got your amendment, because when they say inhalation, they talk about a metered thing. I don't see where the metered thing is in this bill anywhere. Do you?
I don't, and so that's where my discomfort comes from. Again, I'd like to be able to help this veteran that's talking about that, but I'm not comfortable with that definition.
Because if your amendment, it says that it could be, it doesn't necessarily have to be a metered thing. It can be smoking, anything with that, right? Anything that you use.
I don't know what it could be, really, and so that's where my discomfort comes from.
Got a good amendment.
I see no further questions.
Senator Mills, you want to speak on it? All right.
Members, I oppose this, and I tell you why. It's the inhalation of the product that we approved. It's not inhalation or vaping of the raw product. It's an inhalation of the product. You don't want to pigeonhole this to any type of specific definition, because as technology could evolve, unless we would change the definition of what product is legal, you want to have the opportunity to be able to inhale the tincture. It's just the tincture. It's not expanding it on anything. It's just the delivery form. Could be down the road we may have a form that's delivered maybe in a rectal suppository. It's just the delivery form. So I would ask that you just want to make sure y'all wake up. I think I got y'all attention. So I just want to let you know it's the same product, just in an inhalation form. Now y'all paying attention. Thank you very much.
All right. Senator Clay, you have a right to close on your amendment.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm not willing to accept this suppository, so I would ask that you go with the amendment.
All right. Senator Clay has sent up an amendment to which there's objection. When the machines open, those in favor will vote yes, those opposed no. Sir, vote your machines, please. Vote your machines, please. Are you through voting? You through voting? All right, close them up, please. 21 yeas, 14 nays. The amendment is adopted. You have further amendments, Mr. Secretary? All right, on the bill, question, Senator Pell.
I have a condition. I need some vape. Senator, do we have any provisions in this bill for policemen to be able to understand what's in those vape devices? I use vape, it's my term, inhalation devices.
Well, no, and now that the amendment's on inhalation's off the table.
I understand.
Says no, there's nothing in that. That would be a section. This is just to modify the medical marijuana section of law.
Do we have any provisions in the bill to help policemen understand whether someone's driving under the influence?
You wouldn't be under the influence because the product has the lowest form of THC medically allowable, and if you're taking this medication, it's for debilitating diseases, so I don't think that's much of an issue.
Well, do we have any ability for a policeman to be able to evaluate the drugs that someone is taking, that they are in fact legitimately the stuff you're talking about?
Well, I think we're taking a detour because this bill has nothing to do with that. But to answer your question, it would be the exact same thing as say you've been prescribed a legal opioid. And say you're on Lortab and you're driving and something happens and you either get pulled over or something, they would do a blood alcohol test. I'm sure they would have something out there so you would be able to see if you had a large blood level of THC. So in this case, it's like anything else that's legal. If you overdo it, then you should have the consequences of driving under the influence.
But don't you believe that the provisions of this bill make it a whole lot easier for somebody to violate the law and then become intoxicated and drive under the influence?
No, because the inhalation piece is off. Now all the bill talks about is prescribing it if you domiciled in another state. That's all it is now. The bill is basically taking away that debate of changing the delivery form.
Senator Clayton, you got another question in? Come on out.
Thank you, Mr. President. When you say all the bill is about now is the out-of-state prescribers that are licensed in Louisiana, when I get down to page 3, section 2, it deletes 40:1046A2D, E, and 5. So I know you wouldn't mislead us, but when you say that's all it does, where is that picked up elsewhere? And then we also have Act 96 from 2016 is repealed in its entirety. So just in case anybody's feeling uncomfortable with that language, what happens?
I explained it in my presentation. When the bill was, I originally proposed the bill and it was approved by us, we had two sections of law that are identical. There's two identical sections of the law. One was if a scheduling issue took place from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2, it basically had the exact same section of law. The part that's being removed, there's a section identical to it. It's not taking, it's two identical sections, one is removed. So it's still in law.
Okay, so where's the identical part?
I'll have to get it for you, but maybe Ms. Peck can help me with the identical part. But it is in there because, in fact, we talked about that yesterday. But I'll get you the identical part. I'll get that for you.
Senator Walsworth, you got a question? He waves. All right, Senator Peacock.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Mills, on page 3, lines 6 and 7, when you're striking in order to mitigate the risk of bacterial contamination, food-grade ethanol from extra... Okay, this is a product that is being licensed by the state of Louisiana. It's being grown by our universities. Aren't we opening our state up to liability if we are selling a product that is not tested for contamination and it is used by someone who has a recommendation from a doctor and something happens to them because they have contamination in it, they're going to sue the state of Louisiana, correct?
No. What this basically does is ethanol extraction, when the bill was passed years ago, was the way that you basically did the purification process and you did the extraction process. Right now, CO2 extraction is the latest technology that delivers that. If you look at the section right below that, they still have to produce a pharmaceutical grade product and the testing has not been removed. In fact, that's been what the delay has been in the legislation is Commissioner Strain and the two universities have been working closely to make sure that they have a pharmaceutical grade. So the testing will still be in place, the pharmaceutical grade shall still be in place. It's just saying that the extraction process now has been tremendously modified and don't make it specific with the ethanol extraction.
But you are taking out bacterial contamination.
It reverts back to you can't have anything pharmaceutical grade. It's more of a semantics thing. It still has to be pharmaceutical grade.
Okay. And then reading the digest where Senator Claytor mentioned the parts that's being repealed in Section 2, if I recall from your bill from years ago, which I did vote for at that point in time, that if the United States government approved it, your bill would go away. It looks like you're stripping that now to where even if reading the digest is wrong.
I won't say it's wrong. It's just, and I know Senator Claytor just went talk to Ms. Peck. There's two mirror image sections of the bill. It basically eliminates one section of the duplication process because it's become very cumbersome. But the section that's remaining still has everything in place that this removes.
Okay.
And you may want to talk to her because she just talked to Senator Claytor.
Senator Raza, you got a question?
Senator Mills, I'm going to go back to the previous on a question you were being asked about having possession. So you have to have a legal reason to have it, just like you would anything else. So someone said, if I have a prescription for something with the back, I got to have with my name on it, correct?
You're 100% right. It's getting back to the question that Senator Pell had earlier. If you have it in your possession, it has the same look and feel as though you had a prescription for it. So you had the doctor-patient relationship. And I add to it, you have had to have a specific disease, and that disease is the debilitating disease. So you're exactly right.
And I've had many, I don't know, did you know, but of autistic children that's had this. And we already have, this is adding that to that, those that need more of a rapid response. Is that a misunderstanding on that?
Well, there's two things. The amendment that we just passed gives more clarity to what physician can recommend medical marijuana for the autistic pediatric community. The part of the bill that we really don't need to debate anymore is an addition to a delivery form, which was inhalation. So from what you're saying, I think Senator Claytor's amendment brought it back down to its original form of the bill that we passed years ago. Thank you.
Senator Boudreaux, you got a question? He waves. Senator Morrell, you got a question? Senator Morrell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Chairman, I heard Senator Appel's questions regarding how many inhalers it would take to get high off of this medication, and he seemed to say it was like a gateway drug, or that somehow you would get high or be under the influence or something like that. Was that what he was saying? I'm not sure.
No, his question, and I don't want to take words out of his mouth, but his question was basically how would law enforcement be able to tell if someone was under the influence? And my question was, in any drug that's prescribed that is scheduled, you could have that issue with any drug.
And just for clarity, when you're talking about under the influence and driving, it is not clearly simply defined as prescription medication making you intoxicated to drive. If you have guzzled an entire jar of NyQuil, which is over the counter, not prescription, you can still be charged with driving under the influence, correct?
That's exactly right.
And my understanding regarding these inhalers is that the amount of THC present, you'd basically have to get a crate of these things and inhale them like whippets over the course of like 30 minutes to maybe get enough THC to register as even having done them, correct?
You're exactly right. Thank you.
Senator White, you got a question?
So, Senator, where we are right now is you've taken inhalers off?
Senator Claytor did.
But they're off.
Yes, sir. The bill basically now is if you're not domiciled in Louisiana, you would have the opportunity, if you license with the Board of Medical Examiners, to have a patient-specific relationship and recommend it. And then the second portion of it basically talks about the extraction process. So that's basically it.
So if I contact a doctor let's just say Denver, and I say, you know, I had a knee replacement last year, and some days when I'm up here at the Capitol, the time my legs are really hurting me. Can he prescribe or recommend? How much did we change for the medical conditions in the First Amendments, or how it came in?
No, we didn't change the medical conditions, so the condition you're talking about wouldn't even qualify. So if you went to your doctor in Baton Rouge, that wouldn't qualify. But what's happening is, if you have a debilitating condition, and say you go to MD Anderson, you're not domiciled in Louisiana, but you have a patient relationship, a doctor-patient relationship. So if you decide that you want to become a medical marijuana certified recommender, you would have to be licensed with the Board of Medical Examiners in Louisiana, and you would have to be certified to also do it. So you have to really go the extra mile. What this legislation does is, when you have those debilitating conditions, many times you leave the state of Louisiana. So that's what that basically does.
So does the doctor have to see you?
You have to have a specific patient relationship, which is defined by the Board of Medical Examiners, but you could be a specialist that's working with that patient that maybe necessarily didn't see them, but it could be a consulting basis, which is done all the time. It's the relationship that's defined by the Board of Medical Examiners. You just can't make a phone call and say, I think I need this. That's not allowable.
Could I email?
No, you have to have a relationship that's defined by the Board of Medical Examiners. You can't. You have to be my patient, and I have to be your physician. Now, with telemedicine, with technology out there, I may never see you, but I've been consulting on it. So it's not, and once again, it's a debilitating condition that's defined. It wouldn't go back to your first situation that your knee hurts and you think you need something and you found a doctor in wherever.
Well, that's kind of where I was going.
Yeah.
But you still, with telemedicine, you don't have to see that doctor in person, do you? I mean, he could diagnose you over a computer screen through telemedicine right now, the way I read this bill.
Well, you'd have to get into different sections of law with the Board of Medical Examiners and their rule. I mean, when you're licensed with the Louisiana Board of Medical Examiners, it has to be, in this situation, a truly defined patient-physician relationship. Now, you'd have to get into deep sections of the rules and the laws to do it, but this is not anything else new that's been done throughout the United States from a domiciled issue. But you can be domiciled in another state, but you have to be in good standing in Louisiana and licensed in Louisiana.
But still, he doesn't have to see you in person, is my point.
I would say with technology and the way things are, in person, I agree with you, but you still have to document that and have that relationship. And it's a debilitating condition.
And maybe if they haven't done tests, they may not know I have a debilitating condition by telemedicine. It could be a conversation. And go back to that doctor in Denver, and we could talk about the medical marijuana, and if he deems that he needs to, and he's licensed here, or he may want to recommend or prescribe, or since they've passed the hallucinogenic mushrooms now in Denver, I may want some of that too. Could he do that?
Well, let's stay on topic. Let's stay on topic, because we leaving, and I don't want to confuse my members here. We are just talking about a doctor that's domiciled in another state, licensed in Louisiana, that would be able to recommend medical marijuana with a patient-specific relationship. So please, let's not take that detour.
I'm thinking it's a possibility while I'm talking to him on telemedicine that I need some medical marijuana, and if you'll send it to me, he could ship it or write a prescription and I could fill it here, or if he ships it to me, I may request some of those mushrooms too, so I could drink a little tea. Could I do that?
Well, he or she would be violating the law. And if he or she would be doing that, they could lose their medical license, and then that medical license that in Louisiana would transfer to their mother state. So of course you could always have somebody breaking the law, but from an ethical sense, I don't see an ethical doctor doing any of that. I mean, you just wouldn't put your license at risk to be a mail order doctor. They don't do that.
Well, I know doctors lose their license sometimes frequently over Schedule I drugs. And I think THC is a Schedule I drug, marijuana is, unless they've changed it in the last week or so. And that's my point. I just see a lot of potential for abuse to do it this way.
Well, I just don't see it like that because the product is in its lowest form of THC that's medically allowable, and you can't get high on it. It's only a tincture, and it is for the most debilitating medical conditions you have. Now, anybody can abuse the system on anything, but I don't think we can pass legislation to prevent somebody from being a crook on this. I mean, you might find one bad doctor, but for the betterment of the good of the patient, I think this is a good piece of legislation.
Okay, the only other thing I say, I want to know, did you know that the Sheriff's Association and DA's Association have floor notes for it that haven't got out yet, and I got a call from the Sheriff's Association to ask me to explain that they are against this bill?
Well, I would guess so. They've never been for it.
For marijuana or the bill?
They've always been not for taking care of patients with a debilitating disease, so why should they change?
I think their position is the test. You can't, there's no test that you can administer unless you take someone to a hospital and do a blood test. That's probably their biggest opposition, is people driving around under the influence. And thank you for answering my question.
All right. Members, you know, with pace we're going, we could be here till 9 o'clock tonight, so I caution you, please, let's try to move this along. Senator Chabert, you got a question? He waves. Very good. Dr. Thompson, you got a question? Oh, whoa.
A real short question, because this is my partner. A real short question.
That would be something. That would be a first.
What I had this information about the Louisiana Psychiatric Medical Association opposing this because they say it's an expansion, and that we haven't even begun to distributing the marijuana in this state. Wouldn't it be best if we waited to see how the outcomes came in order? That's what the association, do you have a comment about that? Is this?
Sure. I guess we could have a full debate on it if the inhalation piece stayed in place. But now that the inhalation piece has been retained to present law, this basically is the domicile issue which Senator White and I had the discussion on. And that debate basically is, if you have a debilitating condition and you go, say, to Houston at a specialty hospital, right now, if this bill would pass, it would allow that physician that licensed themselves in Louisiana, but they're domiciled in Texas, they could have that patient relationship to recommend it. I think the debate from Senator Claytor's amendment takes a lot of that opposition away because it's not expanding anything.
Well, I don't understand it that way, but you made a point. But my concern, and I wanted to ask you about I understand that the Sheriff's Association, DAs, all of those are still opposed to what the legislation you're offering. Is that correct?
I didn't know that. No one called me. Of course, it's Representative James's bill, and he asked me to present it for him. But I didn't receive a call from anybody. We were in committee. No one showed up. I've never received a call from the DAs or the sheriff. So this is news to me. But historically, they have felt that this is a bill that allows creeping. I will say this, and I'll say this. I can't say it anymore. It's for people with debilitating diseases. And that's just what breaks my heart, that we can't come to a conclusion for that, because there'll always be opportunities to expand anything.
Yes, and I didn't get a note from them any organization but the psychiatrists and doctors. But they did inform me that the DAs and sheriffs. I thought maybe you might know that.
No.
But last question. This is not going to stop it. This would only allow opportunities for testing and such if the bill did not pass. Is that correct?
If the bill does not pass, I think there's two things that I think would be unfortunate. I think the first thing, and y'all are tired of hearing me say this, is a doctor, say in Houston, that majors in oncology, and you have a cancer patient that goes to Houston, gets treatment for oncology, they want to recommend it because they have that relationship. This bill would allow them to do that with the proper licensure. The other portion is the extraction process has been modified and it's been proven to be a more streamlined position if you do it in a CO2 way versus an ethanol way. In the legislature, it identified it specifically. Times change, as you know, and we modify legislation as technology improves. That's the two sections of the bill. The inhalation piece, I think, was the most controversial piece, and it's off the table now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to amend my remarks from yesterday. I've served 46 out of 48 years with Senator Thompson. He has never had a short question. Senator Walsworth, do you want another shot at this?
Thank you, Mr. President. All right, so we're basically just trying only on this domicile and those that are not on the licenses, correct?
Well, there's two parts. There's two parts. The domicile piece, you're 100% right. And this portion here that talks about ethanol extraction, it basically says you have to have a pharmaceutical grade product, but CO2 is more efficient to do the extraction process there. We probably should have never put it in a law and let them do that by rule, Department of Agriculture, but we're taking out and basically now giving the department to do this from a rule-making standpoint. That's the two major sections.
Can you tell me how many out-of-state doctors or physicians are already licensed in the state of Louisiana?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I would be guessing. I don't know, Senator. Because I think, I don't know. I'd be guessing. I don't know how many are licensed in Louisiana because there's just thousands of physicians in the Board of Medical Examiners, and I'm not sure what's in-state or out-of-state. That I don't know. And I would guess, especially Houston, Dallas, those areas where Louisiana patients go, I would guess there's a lot of physicians, but it's a guess.
But I guess you're going to have to go, let's just say I go to Denver or whatever else to get this therapeutic. I have to ask if he or she is licensed in Louisiana. If they're not, my prescription does not follow, correct?
Correct. And once again, because you raise a very good point, if you have a debilitating condition as defined in the legislation and you're going out of state, I mean, imagine the resources you've been spending, the things you've been spending. I mean, it's an issue that if you go out of state with that condition, you're going to see a specialist of high values that for some reason you were referred by to your local physician. So it's a high bar to cross, and not only do they have to be licensed in Louisiana, they have to go through a separate certification process to register in Louisiana. And right now, physicians are slow to do that right now. So it's a double bar to cross.
How does is it 8 or 9 pharmacies, how do they know if we open this up and they see a prescription that comes in from Arkansas or Texas, do they have to call immediately to the Board of Medical Examiners and say, are you licensed? Which right now they wouldn't because they're looking for only the Louisiana address, correct?
No, they would know because they have a DEA number, and that DEA number, along with the Board of Pharmacy and the Board of Medical Examiners, it's pretty robust how they know that. And if you have a DEA license in good standing, And now you having me kind of anticipate what the Board of Medical Examiners would do. I'm anticipating, because they're on top of it, between the Board of Medical Examiners and the Board of Pharmacy, they'll have an up-to-date list, because the issue right now in Louisiana is you may have thousands of doctors, but maybe you have just a couple of hundred that have certified to be recommenders of medical marijuana. So they'll have a robust list of who's completed that.
So only if you are domiciled in Louisiana and only if you have now gone through the extra can you recommend or marijuana, correct?
Correct. For specific medical conditions. Yes. Yes.
One last question. Is that list publicized anywhere? I didn't see where I had to pay for the list and the medical examiners. I noticed that.
It seems from talking to Dr. Collada, and you having me once again kind of just guess on it, but the way Dr. Collada has communicated with me, everything's been wide open, everything's been public. I know the Board of Pharmacy and the Board of Medical Examiners have modified their websites, so my guess is when the product becomes available to the 9 dispensaries, there's, for the consumer also to know, I'm sure there's going to be some publication of this. Thank you.
Senator Morrell, you want to ask a quick question? Come on.
Mr. Chairman, I've heard numerous references to telemedicine. Isn't it true that in this bill you cannot prescribe this via telemedicine?
Correct. The question started getting from Senator White with the patient-specific relationship. He had me kind of talk about what ifs.
Right.
And in my what?
That's prohibited.
Yes.
Okay. Second, it requires a bona fide doctor-patient relationship. Isn't that a higher bar than the numerous pain clinics we have across the state?
Yes, it truly is. That relationship is clearly identified in the Board of Medical Examiners rules and regulations.
So to be clear, unlike where you go to a pain clinic and you go, my back's hurt, give me some Percocet, in this case, it's an oncologist with a bona fide relationship taking a person who is facing a terminally ill, possibly disease, to give them recourse. That's a bona fide relationship versus a transactional relationship, correct?
Correct. And your example is very good. I mean, if you're doctor shopping to get high,
You're better off.
you're going to have to take about 10 gallons of this because it's not going to work.
Okay, last question. There seems to have been a focus on out-of-state doctors doing prescriptions. I would argue, and I'm certainly certain that the Board of Medicine would agree, Chairman Mills, that reciprocity with our medical profession, like all of our professions, is extremely important because it's what allows Louisiana doctors to interact with Texas patients, correct?
Exactly, and you raise a very good point. A reciprocity process is a lot of background research, and you have to be in good standing with your mother state where you're originally licensed. So to reciprocate in Louisiana, you have to really want to do it.
Right. And when you challenge the credibility of Texas doctors seeing Louisiana patients, that really undermines reciprocity, which could negatively impact Louisiana doctors, correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, on the bill, Senator Long, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I rise in opposition to the bill. If you'll give me 2 minutes, I think I can make a logical case for that. In every state, without exception, that adopted laws pertaining to medical marijuana, no exceptions to this, every state that adopted that, it started out as a bill for medical purposes. Now, many of those states, it is now for recreational use. If you were in the state of Colorado, they would tell you that they have created a major problem socially. The other thing that I constantly hear, and I continue to hear from even my constituents and some of yours, is that we ought to go ahead and realize that marijuana is here to stay. And we ought to legalize the recreational use of it and do what to it? Tax it. So it becomes a revenue source for the state. Make no exceptions. Please understand this. What we are doing is creating a pathway for the legalization of marijuana. It may take time. It may take a number of years. But once it becomes common, then the request is going to be, why don't we legalize it and make it recreational and tax it? We're going down a slippery slope. Senator Leno, I appreciated what you said, and I took your lead a few moments ago on that legislation. You said there's some unintended consequences that the state of Louisiana may have to actually absorb some costs that we did not anticipate. Don't think for a moment there are not unintended consequences on this. When we open the door, we'll always have a difficult time closing it.
Dr. Thompson, you wish to comment anyways? Senator Claytor, you wish to comment?
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to put this bill in a form that I thought it might actually work and do something. I've supported people getting access to what they needed in this, but I can tell you when you look at the bill, page 3, line 12, and what gets repealed, and then you try to figure out what actually gets repealed, I can't figure it out, so I've got to vote no on this bill, and I encourage you to vote no too.
Senator Mills, you have a right to close on the bill.
Thank you, members. And I will tell you, Representative James has worked hard on the issue, and I'll just go with a couple of closing points. The inhalation piece was taken out, and as Senator Long talked about, we had this exact debate when we legalized medical marijuana for debilitating conditions. I made a stance up here that I was not proposing recreational, and I remember at that wall right here, there was so many patients that had pediatric children with epilepsy, Crohn's disease, and the parents were at my office day in and day out crying that they were violating laws, they were growing it at their house, they were going to Colorado, they were bringing it in from out of state, and would somebody please work on this legislation, and we as a body determined that medical marijuana was something we should do along with over 30 states. I am not proposing increasing recreational marijuana. I'm not looking to open up any additional doors. This legislation basically came from Representative James, and his thought process was the domicile issue, which that just happens in medicine all day long. And as I said over and over again, to be able to do this, you have to be licensed in Louisiana, you have to be certified to be a recommender, and you have to have a patient-specific relationship. This has nothing to do with recreational marijuana. So that should be taken off the table there. If you think that makes sense, then I think you should vote for the bill. The second component of the bill basically talks about the ethanol extraction process to get a pharmaceutical grade product. That was put into law, that should have been put into rule, but from talking to the sheriffs, that was a compromise that we made. It says now that CO2 extraction is a lot more effective, and that's what should be done. You always modernize legislation. You'll always modernize legislation wherever you go. The third section that Senator Claytor talks about, the removal, we had a huge debate years ago on recommendation versus prescribing. Everything that's been removed is still in law. It's just been a duplication of it. So members, that's what the bill does. Representative James worked hard on it. I've not heard from any sheriff, no DA, none of them have come into any testimony at any of the committee levels we had. And once again, I guess my plea is, if it helps a patient get accessibility and it makes the product more streamlined, I'm just asking for your support. Thank you very much.
Senator Mills has moved final passage of the bill. When the machines are open, those in favor will vote yes, those opposed, no. Secretary, vote your machines, please. Vote your machines. Senator Tarver, yes. Vote your machines, please. You through voting? Are you through voting? All right, close them up. The gentleman desired to give notice of reconsideration. Before he did, the vote was 19 yeas and 18 nays.